Well, welcome to the middle of nowhere, the Australian outback. This place is one of the harshest environments on the planet, where only the toughest can survive, whether it's plants and animals, people or cars. And this here is the toughest Mercedes-Benz you can buy. It's the G Professional, and we're going to put it to the ultimate test, driving it from the Simpson Desert to Uluru to see if it can stand up to the harshest conditions on the planet.
Based on the iconic Mercedes-Benz Geländewagen, which literally translates to cross-country vehicle in German, the Professional models are essentially the same hardcore off-roaders built for the Australian Army. Available to the public for the first time anywhere in the world, it is offered as either a four-seater wagon or a cab chassis ute, and neither is what you'd normally associate with Mercedes-Benz, a brand that has stood at the summit of luxury for more than a century. Nope, these vehicles are designed to appeal to farmers with cattle stations the size of European countries, or emergency service operators like the fire brigade, or global adventurers like Mike Horn, who is leading us on a 4-day trek across the Australian outback as part of his pole-to-pole expedition. The 51-year-old South African-born Swiss is currently circumnavigating the globe via the North and South Poles. After setting off from Monaco last year, he drove his G-Wagon to the southernmost tip of Africa before setting sail to Antarctica, and then became the first person to cross the frozen continent solo and unassisted. He's here with us, thawing out in the middle of Australia before driving through the jungles of Southeast Asia to climb the Himalayas, then on to Siberia, walking across the North Pole, and eventually returning to Monaco sometime next year. Don't think he's a madman having a midlife crisis, as he's the self-proclaimed greatest living explorer, having climbed the world's highest mountains, swum the length of the Amazon, and travelled around the equator without any motorised transport. As a former member of the South African Special Forces, Horn knows what the army needs from its machines, and he wouldn't, and he swears he couldn't travel as far and as wide in anything but a G-Class. But his two German registered G-Wagons are far more luxurious than our G Professional series.
But if you're expecting a luxury Mercedes-Benz, well, you'll be sadly disappointed. This thing has got heated seats and air conditioning, and that is about it. There's no sat-nav, there's no Bluetooth connection. The interior is simply meant to be hosed out. It's fully utilitarian. There's pretty basic seats that are actually quite comfortable to sit in for long distances. There's pretty simple instrument gauges. There's lots of buttons for all the ancillary switches. And you'd think you could even open this center console, but you can't, because Mercedes-Benz has relocated all of the ECU and the computers high up in the car so that you've got massive water crossing ability.
It even has a steel bonnet strong enough that you can stand on it. And underneath there is a 3-litre turbo diesel V6 that pumps out 135 kilowatts of power and 400 newton meters of torque, and drives a permanent all-wheel drive system through a 5-speed automatic transmission. And you're paying a premium for that kind of toughness, as it's not cheap. The wagon costs $109,900 plus on-road costs, and the ute is an extra 10 grand.
This thing is definitely not built for the cities. It's fairly agricultural in how it drives. The 3-litre V6 engine up front isn't the most powerful, but it's got plenty of pulling power for torque and getting traction up the hills. The steering, it's an old steering box setup, so it's got a bit of play in it, and it's quite heavy in how it reacts. But for out here, in the conditions that it requires, this thing is bulletproof. It's got 3 diff locks, center, front and rear, plus high and low range gearbox, transfer case that you can literally climb mountains. In some instances we climbed a steep rocky hill without any of that stuff, so really even Australia's harshest conditions are too easy for this car.
Our journey started at the Mount Dare Hotel on the western edge of the Simpson Desert before heading to Dalhousie Springs for our first night under the brilliant desert night sky. It's immediately obvious that the G Professional is built to handle this kind of country, where the red dust roads are rough even at the best of times, sprinkled with rocks and ruts and the occasional surprise patch of soft bull dust that feels as though it could swallow a car whole, even one as big and as heavy as the G300 Professional. The next day we backtracked through Mount Dare and along the Binns track towards Old Andano Station, stopping for a session to charge up and over some blood red sand dunes. The following day we set out to really test the G-Wagon's off-roading ability, with a detour into Deepwell Station south of Alice Springs, crossing craggy ravines and traversing rocky mountain roads, which the G-Team performed without breaking a sweat. It did feel less at home when we eventually made it onto the regular blacktop of the Lassiter Highway for the last leg into Uluru, where its vague steering made it wander across the gradient of the road, The off-road tyres are noisy, and it's almost flat out doing the national speed limit. But the simplicity of this car is its best attribute. To give it its greatest compliment at the end of the day, I could have kept going and going and going, and knowing that it would too.
Well, we've made it. We've come from the middle of nowhere to the middle of the country right here at Uluru. And it really should come as no surprise that this thing, the Mercedes-Benz G Professional, has handled the most extreme conditions in the ultimate of ease. While it might not be the most comfortable Mercedes-Benz that you can buy, just like the S-Class stands for luxury, that three-pointed star means this car is the most extreme it can be.